Mhm. Hi, everyone. I'm Gloria Hester. I'm here with Chiara Poscente, and we were just chatting a little bit before I hit record for this. I'm so excited that you're here. You look amazing. I know you got lots of cool stuff that you're doing and that you're working on. I'm so happy for you. And so for those watching, I just want to let you know that Chiara and I are going to be talking about all things horses, some things somatics, and we're going to be sharing about what it was like for Chiara. We did a floor session together, some somatic education, and we're going to talk about that. And then, but first I want to know, what are your horses' names? So
That's always my first question too. I'm like, oh yeah, lovely to meet you. Tell me about your animals.
yes.
So kind of my main horse, or heart horse, as people kind of like to say, is sort of the trendy term now. His name is Dakota, and he just turned 10. He's a BLM Mustang from San Wash Basin here in Colorado.
Awesome.
Yeah. I have my thoroughbred mare, Juno, and her baby, Eowyn. She's Irish Giraffe. I say baby, she's 6.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're always babies.
They're always babies.
Mhm.
And I have a Dutch warm blood Playboy who is very, very new to me. We are just getting to know each other.
What is his name?
Playboy.
Oh, his name is actually Playboy.
Sure is. Well, actually, his registered name is Habibi von Otterdick. And I was like,
Hey, that's a lot. Yeah, that's a
a
lot.
friend of mine who passed him on to me, she had dubbed him Playboy, and it kind of stuck. So
It's that's a great name. So when you said that, I thought, oh, his personality. So, but no, I love it.
uh-huh.
I love that. Well, thank you. And is that your herd in totality? Did we get them all?
Well, those are the ones that are technically under my
Yeah.
name. And then Zach, my husband, has 4 as
Okay.
well. So we're
Yeah.
even now. We each have
Good.
4.
That's perfect. Yeah, it's a perfect marriage. Well, so I know Horses and Somatics brought us together through a mutual friend, and I'm so happy that it did, and so thrilled about that. And so I wanted to ask you if you wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like before we did our work together that we've done somatically. So
Yeah. So this is the kind of somatic stuff is something that I've gotten into, just especially in the last few years, kind of by accident. I started getting into rehabbing horses.
yeah.
That was not a career path that I had envisioned for myself. That wasn't like, oh, this is what I'm going to do with my life. It just sort of happened.
Mhm.
Of course, growing up, like training, and I'm a trainer, so everything's a behavioral issue. And then, of course, as we learn more, I learned, well, no, in fact, most things are not behavioral issues.
Ah,
And so I started, working through physical and emotional rehab with the horses. And then, when you're involved in that kind of work, it is, I think, impossible not to look in the mirror
yeah.
and turn that around and realize, like, okay, this isn't just about the horse and their mind and their body. This is about me too. And if I'm really going to be in a space where I can help them, well, I need to be centered and balanced emotionally and physically. So I started to get a little bit into yoga. I had some kind of bad yoga experiences early on.
Most have. We could do an entire video on that alone. We might do another video.
Like, and so I never really got hooked into yoga, but I like wanted to so badly. And so I eventually just kind of like ended up making up my own stuff, like my own kind of mat program based on what felt good.
Yeah.
Um, and then working with Catherine Lowry, Equilibrium Biomechanics.
Yeah.
So yeah, she works very closely with Celeste as well. And that's kind of how we all got connected. And then, that's just been incredible, diving deeper into breath work and really into gentle movements. So I've had a lot of crashes in my life from 3-day eventing and running horses on the racetrack and yeah, semi-pro downhill skateboarding. That'll beat you up pretty good.
Skateboarding, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing.
So
I would say quite the athlete, really. You definitely have.
yeah, I was.
Now, semi-pro downhill skateboarding, you're an athlete.
And then that catches up to you though. And I started to suffer from really, really chronic pain, horrible pain. And of course, when you're in pain, you're not going to be very athletic.
Yeah.
And I was kind of searching outward for all the answers, which I think is very similar for a lot of people, that we're going to physio and we're going to the chiropractor. And, I found an incredible TCM practitioner, the acupuncture and whatnot really helped. Like all of these things, massage therapy would give me relief. But I started to notice it in my own body, the same thing I'd noticed in the horses where, they see the body worker, they see the chiropractor, they get adjusted, they get aligned. And 5 days later, their body has pulled itself back into its little pretzel.
Yep. Yeah. Their brain is pulling their body back into whatever compensations they had before, because there was never a re-educational process for the horse's brain. And I see, because we're in the time of the internet land, it may be very easy for people to think that somatic education is body work, and it is not body work. It is the brain controlling everything. It's educational for the brain, and the brain is controlling the body. I just needed to get that in there, because I don't think, unless we, really stick to the truth of what real somatic education really is, it will get completely lost in a slew of other.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I'll just jump into just for the somatic record, the somatic facts, so that, because it's so nuanced and we're in a soup of so many things, that people can think, oh, I know what that is. And they really believe they know what it is, and they don't really understand.
It's like, oh, not quite.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It was interesting, because that's the approach that I took with horses, is that I could see it, and I didn't necessarily have a great depth of the anatomy, but I do understand what healthy posture is in a horse, what healthy movement is, what a healthy mind is. Yeah. I know that in my bones. And I also know that no amount of body work will resolve anything if the horse is not in a receiving energy, and if they are not relearning, honestly, how to stand and how to move and to work through their own compensatory patterns. So we flip that lens, and I flip it on myself, and I had the same realization that it doesn't matter how many massages I get. It doesn't matter how much acupuncture and how much rest and how much stretching. None of that matters if I don't know how to breathe properly, if I don't know where my body is in space, and if I don't know how to influence my body in space in a healthy way.
Absolutely, yes. And that's why I'm so thrilled to have conversation with someone like you, and to have you have had some experience of your own movement practice somatically, because I know you are a person who's with the horses, who can make such a difference for them every day. And that absolutely, when I started this magical journey, was my number one thing, was like, how do we get this to the horses who need it? I wanted to make it so popular that they couldn't keep it out of the barns for the horses who needed it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's the dream.
Yes, that is the dream.
That is the dream.
There's a fun way of saying that. It's a little more nuanced. I won't say it on camera, but you'll hear it, and it's hilarious.
Oh, good.
It's like, it's like I've met sheiks' horses. Well, the sheiks don't get it. The horse does. So it's like, that's what matters about this. And so I was told a long time ago by well-meaning people, they're like, Gloria, horses aren't online, people are. So you have to talk about this online. So that's what we're doing here today. So, and then, like you said, when you turn that mirror on yourself, and, we all have something called mirror neurons. Mm-hmm. We have them, horses have them. And so when we're more integrated somatically, we're more aware, we're more sentient. That alone, even if we don't know horses, that alone is a good place to start. I've worked with many people who've come to retreats, and they had never been with horses. They just felt led to come. And then they were among horse people. So it was really a good mix, because you have all this magic. So it could be somebody who's really having this profound experience for themselves and for the horses, but it's the first time they've been with them. So it just, there's so much potential there for all sentient beings to start to be with themselves this way and to be with their animals this way. And you are leading the edge of that now,
Oh.
through being willing to show up on camera. Like I was, the first Facebook Live I ever did was because I wanted the horses to have this work. And I knew if I, so my gay best friend, he did the recording in the barn and he's hilarious and always encouraged me to,
Oh,
so it was really,
yeah, we need our village.
yes, we did. Yes. So that's another thing. So thrilled to show up and, you step outside of your comfort zone. And then of course, after we do the call, you can feel a little more regulated. You have tools to work with to feel more regulated. And yeah, so it's a horsewoman I talked with years ago named Leslie Desmond. I really admire her. And she said, when you meet a horse, you're not meeting that horse, you're meeting the last person who worked with that horse. And so it was just such a profound, she has such a way, as you know, of saying things in such a helpful way. And then just to have the awareness around that. So then after something like this, where you make a recording, you can go and do something to be more regulated before you go back to be with your horses. But then that next step is working with horses somatically. So
Yeah.
So let's see, do you want to say something you noticed during the floor work together? If you had an aha moment for your own body?
And this may seem overly simplified, but I think what really struck me was how subtle the movement can be and have such a powerful impact. That and I'm such a, I was a triathlete as well, and I used to do this trail running and like alpine trail running. And I'm such a like feel the burn person. And like, if it doesn't hurt, it's,
Yeah.
so these ideas of like, okay, well, if I'm going to physio or I'm, using my body, like, oh, it should hurt.
Yeah.
And to really have that, I mean, essentially I was kind of myth taken on that one. That is, it's not, I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that it is not healing in
It is
my
not
experience.
healing. It's not healing. And it was part of the culture. I mean, it is the culture that taught you that. And so you were living in it, being taught to ignore your own feedback.
Yes.
And that is what will cause sensory motor amnesia, pain, and ignoring your own feedback.
Yes.
Mhm.
And of course, having that kind of internal disconnect where, our mind, the mind space is kind of doing its logically, trying to rationalize everything and reason everything. And then, the heart space might be saying one thing and then my poor body is going like, please slow down.
Yeah.
And so being on the floor, and I remember at one point you had me move my head in a certain, and it was like probably millimeters, like it was something like bring my ear like slightly back and down, and I felt it like ripple all the way down like into my toes. And then all of a sudden all these, like, I felt my hamstrings relax
Mm.
and turn off, and it was just this incredibly profound thing for me that, like, I moved the side of my face 4 millimeters and it's having this huge ripple effect through the rest of my body. And it was like, okay. Like, wow. So again, at risk of kind of oversimplifying it, I think that was the biggest thing for me, was really recognizing that when we are retraining our body, when we're taking away our compensatory pathologies, when we're, experiencing essentially new neural pathways, honestly, on how to move, that gentle is much more effective.
Yes, it is. And that's such a, thank you for everything you just shared, because our own inner experience, when we have that, that's where the learning can happen. And so we can learn the neuroscience behind it. And I know it's really helpful to know the neuroscience behind it and to learn that. But that is not what creates the change in your nervous system or in the resting length of your muscles. It's only through the feedback that you were able to have that can happen.
Yeah.
And that's true for the horses as well. And so when you use the word gentle, and that word, that also you could use the word subtle if you wanted to too, about just the slight variation of the direction of a movement. Because when you're doing that, when you're varying the slight variation like that, and you can apply that to your own experience, and I always think of what that can be for a horse, because when you do that subtle variation of the direction of a movement, you could think of it like rays of a fan. And so those rays, as they turn, so all the different muscle fibers that are involved. And as you know, the muscles, it looks sort of like a quilt, like this beautiful quilt where they overlay and overlap and go in all these magnificent directions. And there isn't anything that's separate. And people who, may have studied anatomy and things like that from back in the day, we were taught to look at it as though, oh, this muscle is the only thing that matters. It isn't. There is so many in the motor plan. So we could talk about functional movement, which is more interesting and more important for us as living, breathing beings. We're not cadavers, we have, but I digress. But anyway,
no, not at all.
the rays of the fan, so the muscle fibers, if you can make the movement subtly change the direction, you can very precisely target the very muscle fibers that may have been pulled involuntarily into these compensatory patterns and are held in the low brain. So then the experience can occur, and then the brain can then release those muscles, and the changes like that, it doesn't take. So depending on the individual, things can be necessary for repetition and things. But once the learning has occurred, and like you said, those new neuronal pathways are there, that's their new pattern now, and they have that. And so, and I could say so much more about horses and riders, and there's many things I haven't done because I didn't want that message to get lost. And I didn't want people to keep just putting the patterns back, because I don't think that's really where we want to head with anything. And so you can tell I'm like, I have a lot. But those muscle fibers, that's why these subtle variations can be so helpful for different animals, different sentient beings. And you as a rider, you can think about, as a trainer, you could think about when you're asking the horse for something, if it doesn't feel as easy as you might like, you can go back to something that feels easy again, and then think about how you might maybe organize your hands or your body in a subtle way, or your head even in a subtle way, and then ask for and see if it feels easier. And these are ways riders can start to integrate some of these things for their horses that are not in, the groundwork with the horses is so phenomenal, and there's so much more potential. So as you know. Yeah.
But it's funny in hindsight to think that I was working with the horses and doing this very gentle postural work where, I would just having them very subtly shift their weight, right? And from hoof to hoof, and shift weight forward and shift weight back. And, okay, we're going to relax this muscle and we're going to activate this muscle. And like, these tiny little and people probably, walk by and think, what the heck is that trainer doing? She's not even, she's just standing there. And I had that with the horses. And then I would come home and get on my mat and like abuse myself.
Yeah. Yes. And that's the conditioning. And we had a horse when I was growing up. He had been he had been with he was a magnificent horse, very well trained, very intelligent. And I would see him sometimes in the field. If he thought he did something just on his own that wasn't correct, he would stop and he would back himself up.
Oh.
So he had, so that we all have a lot of deconditioning. We have a lot of deconditioning to a lot of things that we can learn and grow and evolve. And no one has completely mastered that, or we wouldn't be here on the planet,
Agreed.
So I could see where, that horse, by the way, his name was Trouble. He was my sister's horse, but I loved him. Like we just had some kind of connection. but he would back himself up. And so that's what makes me think about you going and being on your mat, like you said, and abusing yourself. And I used to train a lot of people who were studying yoga therapy, and they were already teaching, and they were, but I liked to train people who were already teaching. And oftentimes my job was to help them come out of habituations that they had learned in their yoga practice. Yoga was meant to be a healing art, and it is a healing art, but there aren't many people who are able to apply it as a healing art. And so oftentimes I feel a little bit challenged about, my background in yoga therapy, because I know people have a certain impression about what it might be like. And they might think, well, I can't do that because I can't do these certain things. But they don't realize, like, I go into ICU with people in comas for, this is not about a fitness level. This is about a nervous system level.
Well, you're speaking my language.
Yeah. So, and I say that is to help people understand you can be in a full body cast and have, some benefits, some effects from, because, and we could go into topics that most people were like, what are you saying right now? But we may save those for other times. But I say that to let people know it doesn't matter where your physical state is, or for any horse, the same thing. It doesn't matter. We all start where we are. So a horse, if they can barely walk, you can work with them in ways to help them that for their nervous system and for the way their brain is organizing their movements. And those are just very simple principles anyone can learn to apply. And so whether that's a veterinarian or an acupuncturist or a trainer or a massage therapist, there are somatic principles, or a personal trainer, or when you go into rehab under the doctor's care and they send you to physical therapy. If a physical therapist can learn somatic principles and apply those to their knowledge base that they already have, that way the person won't have to be released out of PT work and not have their mysteries solved. Because the difference is you're not trying to override the brain, you're working with the brain. That's the difference one of the differences in a somatic approach. You're not. And so many approaches, they are literally trained, highly trained to try to override the brain.
Which when you say it out loud, I'm like, well, that's ludicrous.
It is ludicrous. And that's why people get on their mats and abuse their bodies.
Yeah.
We had a school system of it. We could talk about the trauma of PE. We could, because these things, I mean, I have conversations with people in Japan about the trauma of PE, how women who don't like to exercise because of things like that, even the word exercise. So there's so much potential with the current level where we are. There's so much potential there for all sentient beings. And it's just a matter of, how deep you want to go down that rabbit hole, because it's beautiful in that rabbit hole. It's beautiful.
Georgia's rabbit hole.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm excited I know about it. But it is that interesting thing that it can be very hard to not apply the principles that we put towards our animals, our kids, and to not then do that for ourselves. I think that's extremely common, probably especially for women.
Yes.
And so that's been the big changing thing for me. And of course it did start working with Catherine, and so I had a little bit of a hold on it.
Yeah.
And then during the session with you, it was incredible to feel like my right leg is what I would consider a little bit neurologic. Like I don't always know where it is. Yeah. Or I didn't used to. I do now, which is pretty amazing, because I would, when I was working on just simply standing and then walking straight, 5 steps, slowing one foot, stopping the other. and then trading, stepping off with the opposing limb,
Yeah.
and 4 or 5 steps, and then slowing that limb, stopping the other. And I would be practicing this, and I would like think that my feet were so under me. And then I'd look down and my left foot would be like, yep, I'm right here, right under you. And then my right foot would be like,
Right.
okay.
So I'm curious, when you skateboarded, where would your right foot be on your skateboard? Where would it,
On the back of the board,
and
just
would it, how would
honestly,
it be positioned? Would it be slightly outward, or would it be kind of, would it be straight? Where would it be?
it depends on if I'm turning or if you're turning or if you're going straight. Say if
Yeah.
you're going straight, it would be toe forward. At least back when I was racing, they've
Mhm.
changed things a little bit. They're doing it better now, which is great. But I would say like slightly out, forward, but slightly out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, there can be so many reasons, we create that the adaptations happen and then get held by
Mhm.
the low brain, but there can be other reasons. And I know if you like even mounting and dismounting over and over habitually in the same way, that will create compensations, and we'll hold those even when we're asleep. We hold them for the rest of our lives, but we don't know. It's beyond our voluntary awareness. So we can't really do anything about it. Somatic movement is the way to go in. I think it's literally the last frontier is the inner frontier, um, you know, for all of us. And horses, I think, really respect that, and for them to have the opportunity to experience that in their own somas, their own bodies. Soma is Greek for the body. Yeah, so it's the intelligent body, but it's then they have free choice again too, because if you think about a rider, if they're creating that habituation from mounting and dismounting, the horses certainly are creating some form of habituation from bracing to take on the weight of the rider, so
Yes.
they can have their own. And then that affects everything they do, because yeah. So
Yes.
yeah.
And it's mental as well. I mean, we think about that left side issue. If all we ever do is approach the horse from the left, halter them from the left, lead them from the left, groom, tack, like mount, all these things,
Mhm.
well, not only is there a physical brace that is happening, but there's an emotional disconnect there as well, because they're not getting the same sensory inputs on the right side of their body. And
Yeah.
then you go around to the right side of the body and the horse goes, wow. It's like,
Absolutely. Yes.
oh,
Yeah, I worked with the horse. He was out west, and I have permission to talk about him. I never talk about any horses unless I have permission to talk about them. I respect their privacy too, just like our privacy. But he had been raised on a reservation, born on a reservation, and he was Mustang, but he was the first horse I worked with that it was so very apparent that when I went from working somatically on the left to working somatically on the right, we were literally starting completely over again, completely a ground zero again and again and again. And so he was the first horse that it was that apparent for me. And his person shared with me where he'd come from and how he'd been started that she knew of and things like that. So
yeah,
made more sense then.
it's pretty wild. But we think about that for ourselves as well. And thinking about, having the experience I had with you, where it was on the left side and this very gentle movement. And then it was like all of a sudden I had feeling in my right leg that I didn't know I could have. It was like a valve turned on, and all of a sudden there was energy going to this place that I had no idea was not receiving signal,
Yeah.
and so it's been very interesting now. And of course, the work that I've done with Catherine
Yeah.
to kind of activate and engage and accept rotational forces and whatnot. Now, like, I can stand on my right leg.
Yes, it all sets you up. There are so many useful pieces to bring into the equation, that it's just, once you start kind of on that path, it never loses its depth, its fascination, it never loses any of
Grows.
that. It grows. It absolutely does. It becomes this, you know, this very rich landscape of potential and possibility, and that literally to the level of the difference between someone walking again or never walking again. if the quote unquote paralysis is being caused by sensory motor amnesia, somatic education is how, just like you said, you're like, all of a sudden this one thing, and then my right leg is back. Of course, you weren't paralyzed, but the difference is, if I ask someone to paint using their toes, holding a brush using their toes, if they haven't developed the motor plan to do that, they probably can't even hold the brush. But if they practice and they have the motor plan to do it, they can paint beautifully. So
Yeah.
so oftentimes people who are told certain things, well, there's more to it than just what is apparent on the surface, because we're living, breathing beings, and we can re-educate through our sensory motor system. Yeah. Now that if a nerve is completely severed, and so there are things where, they used to think that nerves couldn't grow back, and now they know, depending on the level of severity, they can. So, but I just want people to know there's so much room, and I think it comes through being open to be asking the question. And I mean, I wouldn't be doing this work if I hadn't been open, because I was pulled to the, pulled, and you have to be pulled like that, so what do you think as far as your experience, like with your somatic floor work and things like that, just everything you've encountered? What do you feel like you personally was your biggest breakthrough, whether that was your work with your horses or for yourself or maybe somewhere else? But
honestly, the biggest breakthrough has been changing my MAP program, and that has been huge. And working on being a rider outside of the saddle.
Yeah.
And it's, understanding, and it's not just body awareness. Like, I feel like that's way oversimplified to just say, oh, well, it's body awareness. Well, what's that anyway? People say that, and I'm like, do we know what we're talking about? No. No. And it was understanding that in order to change my relationship to the horses and their bodies, I had to change my relationship with my own body. And not just about, because I've always been fairly happy with my body and what she's been able to accomplish and do for me. I'm actually pretty proud of her. She's very impressive.
Yes.
But I also had this sort of, I don't want to say flippant, but like oh, it'll be fine. Right?
Yeah.
Like oh yeah, okay. Right now is a good example. I've got some very, very, very mildly fractured ribs. And I still have that part of my brain that's like, oh, it'll be fine. And I'm like, no, it won't be fine. Like, I will actually, like, I can feel myself wanting to kind of do this. Protecting it. And I'm like, and I don't need to, because I am not under threat right now, and I can regulate my nervous system. And honestly, just put some love into that area and say, like, hey, you don't have to worry about anything right now. You can just chill and relax.
Yeah.
And and the rest of me can actually hold myself up. So it's about loving my body, but in a very different and more involved way, if that kind of makes sense.
It does. Yeah. And even the floor work that we did, you can revisit that and do it at your level of comfort. So if anything's uncomfortable, you can visualize the movement, as you're healing. So that way, because the beauty of how we're designed, it would be natural that you would want to, like if you had a place, like say if you had a place on your skin that's injured, and it would be natural that it would be more sensitive, or you'd want to kind of, try to protect or try to guard the area. And so it's just when it becomes that habituation after the area has healed, then you want to make sure you don't have any sensory motor amnesia in that area or anywhere else in your body from that. It's natural that you would be a little protective of that area. And
but it's part of that memory where my poor body is so used to being ignored in this, where like, I feel it will go into overdrive.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
will
and
go into this, like, it'll have this huge, and I'm like, okay, yes, my ribs hurt, but they're not snapped in two. I don't like yes, okay, we have an injury, but it is like I don't need to clamp down, and I can
yeah,
still breathe, I can still be open. And so it's just this constant reminder. And to be okay, like, one thing that's really interesting because of this, I have had to, just over the last week, change my MAP program again, because there are things you cannot do when your ribs hurt. And
absolutely.
to just be, back to that sort of gentle or subtle,
Mhm.
and revisiting how much I can accomplish just by lying on my back and breathing
Yeah,
and putting air into certain places and finding some energy flow and finding some deeper softening and relaxation.
absolutely. Yeah.
And that's been, now all of that said, you're probably going to hear from me in a couple weeks when this is
Yeah. Yeah, well, as long as you're, what you have that you're working with right now, as long as it's comfortable to do the movement, you're good. And if it's not, you can visualize it. And then definitely there are, rib injuries they're interesting because it can be, when say we're moving our arms and our legs, we're always moving our ribs, and so
Mhm.
it can be an interesting area to allow it to heal and to help it heal. Um and listening to the feedback is such an important thing. And I think there are so many gifts in the, like, say, in the practice of yoga therapy. Yoga nidra has always been one of my favorite modalities because it is such a non-doing and such a deep connecting to different areas of your body, and is such a profound thing. And so I would say that I just use what works. And so what you're describing, some of this is just making me think of these different things that maybe you're not giving it a name, you're not giving it a label, but sometimes the most challenging thing for people to do is what's called non-doing, where you are, so it's funny because we call it, like a mat work or mat practice, but it can be some of that, um, originally, I think some of the things of yoga are so brilliant because some people, if they're so hyperstimulated, you just
Yeah.
have to help them burn off some injury so that they actually can experience non-doing without screaming and running out of the room, because they're so, so there is a method to the madness, if you will. And I know people they're so gifted in that area. It's not my zone of genius. I have my area, but I feel I've always wanted to put together like a power team of people because I know who they are, and like really bring all the things because there's
Oh,
so
you should do
much.
it.
Yeah,
Just do
yeah,
it.
yeah. I have always wanted to break it all the rules because it's like
Do it.
yeah, yeah, I love it. It would be it is such a powerful, it has been such a powerful thing for those. Yeah. And so you're right. I'm going to put that back on my itinerary. Um, so I love that. Let's see. So how have you noticed any with your writing? Any shifts that you've made in how, yeah, okay.
Mhm. I mean, terms of big shifts, like knowing where my right leg
Oh,
is.
yes. Yeah.
That's been pretty big. One of the things, and this is sort of another one that's funny, that's something that I say all the time to my students. I'm really big on what our eyes are doing when we're riding. And something that I noticed after our session was how much bigger my field of vision became.
Mm.
I mean, that blew my mind. And I have very good vision, and I thought that my peripheral was very good, and it was like, and it was immediate too, that when we closed out the call and I got up and I was kind of walking around, and I think I danced a little bit because I was like, ooh, I want to test this out.
Yes.
I was dancing a little bit. I know, just very gentle kind of dancing. I didn't go
I love it
crazy,
though. It's great.
just kind of moving around. And I went outside, and it was like the world was 25% bigger.
Mm.
And not necessarily sharper vision or clearer vision, but just more of it.
Yeah.
And then getting into the saddle with that, it was kind of this interesting. mix of being more aware of my surroundings, but less concerned because I could see them better. Does that kind of make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And as you're sharing that, I'm thinking about, I know some of the neuroscience behind that. And I'm like, should I share that, or should I just let that be what it is? You know, this thing of like, it's beautiful. Like, do we always have to know the science behind it? Because you had the experience of it, and you had, and I do it there. It does point to a few things about the shift in your autonomic ladder that we could talk about, if for those who science geeks who find that interesting.
It is interesting.
And then of course, from the yoga therapy perspective, you know, like say if you're able to see colors other people can't see, Eric Schiffman, he'd say, well, she's beginning to be able to see energy, you know. So there are different ways to speak to these, and then some of the neuroscience, let's say that it would be more likely when your vision becomes more foveal like that, when it's broader like that, when you can see more peripheral vision like that. So in the species, a wolf has that very narrow vision to see like what is the prey, right? And ironically, even men and women, if you're born a woman, you have a different vision than men.
Really?
Yes, women have vision that's more the way a horse's vision would be, or a deer.
Interesting.
And
I'm
men
not
have,
shocked.
no, I'm not either. And so these things are wired into us for reasons. And you know, so but being able to for your vision to widen like that after somatic floor work, or we could say somatic floor play, because it's not work. It's
No other
work.
work.
Sometimes it's work for people to pay attention, but they have to, you have to develop the neuronal connections for that. But when your vision is broader like that, it's more expansive and more open in your autonomic ladder. You're more in ventral, and ventral is where you're curious about life, and you feel safe and you feel seen.
Oh my God, I'm gonna cry.
Yeah.
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 Wow,
Yeah.
that really just, whew.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah, it's
yes.
play and joy and these things that had been missing a little bit. Not terribly so, but a little bit, especially in the last year, a little bit of joy missing from life. And that has been coming back big time.
Yeah. Oh, I love
I
that.
hadn't made that connection,
Yeah.
because I would say, especially in the last, because when was our session? It was about 3 months ago, 2 months
Yeah,
ago.
I think about three, maybe three. Yeah, I could look in, maybe this is March, maybe. I think it might have been early March. I think early March, late February, somewhere in there, I think.
Hadn't thought about this, hadn't put those two together. The amount of play that both Zach and I have incorporated into our lives in the last few months, significant. Well, okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's lovely. I mean, I think that the beauty of, you know, that like there's beauty also in just having the experience, and then there you are, you're just in it. And then, like I said, sometimes it is great to know the neuroscience behind it, because I think it's wonderful, because then you can share and you can understand what might be happening for others in your life. All of a sudden, you make a lot more sense to yourself, and you make a lot more sense to others, and others make a lot more sense to you. And that is where that level of the modalities that I study and teach, I bring a lot in, because I think a lot is necessary. And because if we only have one lens, sometimes we're missing some things that are really important. And I mean, I'm aware of this, and that's why I think about, like, I have my dear beloved mentors, and I also have so many influences in my world. I couldn't speak to the level of things that I speak to right now if I didn't. And so being able to have, because the only thing that will create that for you is the doing the thing, right? That's what'll create it for you. The other stuff is good to know, because you can have so much more compassion for yourself and others
Others, yeah.
And but going back to the vision thing, for years I had so many people coming in. I love to teach a form of restorative yoga therapy where your body is supported by a lot of props. And I would use my body as a prop for a horse oftentimes.
I do that.
Yep. So it's like how to help conveys a certain level of information. So it just naturally translated across these different modalities to me because your nervous system knows what it knows, you know.
Yeah.
So I can think about this, you're in the restorative postures, your body, your nervous system has a chance to learn how to do something called yield. And not many people speak to that or feel that on a visceral level. And again, it's one of those things that has to be learned. And it's from utero and infancy and so forth and so on. And it can be relearned or remembered. It may have never been experienced, but it can be learned. And then I was thinking, like, how can we help translate that for the horses? How can they have that sensation so that they have that? And so we have a long way to go as well. Do you know what I mean? We have a long way to go. But we're already there because the nervous system can time travel. We're already there. So I get a little, but it is what it is. But as far as vision goes, when I was teaching the restorative postures and the supported, oftentimes people would tell me afterward, they would say, my vision came back. I can see clearer. The colors are different. I can, like you said, a broader vision. And one woman who was legally blind did get her vision back in her right eye. So I worked with her. Well, it was both. It was the restorative and somatic education that we were.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so she'd had a car accident 25 years prior. I didn't know that. And she didn't think to tell me she was blind in her right eye, but we released the muscles, the cranial muscles that were pressing on the cranial nerves, muscles that were pressing on the cranial nerves, and her vision came back.
Well, I'm starting to see these things happen in horses as well.
Yes.
A body is a body.
That's right. Yeah. They can
But it was,
recover.
that you use the word ventral.
Uh-huh.
I know the first few times, especially, and then I don't know, like, I don't feel that I lost it, but I do feel that it integrated. And once things integrate, I think it becomes the new norm. And so it doesn't feel as big of a deal. But the first few times that I rode after our session, I felt an incredible internal alignment, just so that I could speak to all my parts. And because I had so much more kind of environmental awareness, I felt very secure to go inward and to actually kind of like play with, I mean, honestly, like right, through the skin and the muscles and the skeleton, I mean, right to my organs. Like, what is my kidney doing right now? Like,
yes,
do I have some like trapped emotion there? Do I need to? And because I was in this space, the horses that I was getting on were so much more receptive. And, I have one in particular that working with who has a hard time standing always, but especially if you're on them.
Yeah.
And this horse just like, I got on him and he just like, he had a full body shake.
Yeah.
And then he just stood and yawned and like these big, big deep breaths. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like, wow.
Yes.
Look what my butt cheeks are doing right now. This is amazing. But I think if you don't have, and I say this for myself, like for me to not have that, again, I don't want to use body awareness because that's not really it, but the ability to actually speak internally and listen. I think listen is more accurate there, to listen to what's happening internally and then work with it instead of against it. How well the horses are responding to that is pretty mind-blowing.
Yes. I mean, the horses have a level, as you know, a level of awareness and sensitivity that I don't think people can really fathom. And just how there's a scientist named Rupert Sheldrake. I love his work. He did these studies years ago. The studies he did were with dogs, and his studies were to see if dogs were telepathic or not. And it turns out they are.
Yes,
And
they are.
the scientific community tried to blackball him for that. You know, I guess that's the term you'd use for that. It's ostracized him. But it kind of backfired on them because it made him and his research really well known. I love his work. But he talked about something called the morphic field or morphic resonance. But the study, just a quick kind of to tell you what he did, you may know about this, but
I don't, and now I'm very curious.
they did. It was so fascinating. I love that he did this. It was back in the days when people used beepers. It was before cell phones. So they gave all the people in the study a beeper, and they would give them an assignment to say, go to a mall 6 hours away or go 3 hours away to wherever, right? And the only thing the person knew was that whenever they received the beeper message, that meant they were to start to return home again. And so meanwhile, all of the dogs that belonged to these people, they had cameras on the dogs. So they were observing what they were up to while their person was gone. And so the person would leave and they didn't know when they were going to be coming back or anything. And so they had their beepers but the dogs would just sleep, or just do whatever. But every dog, the moment the person, no matter how far away they were, the moment the person received the message that it was time for them to head home, the dogs got up and went to the door and went to the window. Yeah. Or, wherever they would go to be like, my person's on their way, they would wake up and go. And so, I'm sure the reason they set the variable of the distance was to see, well, does it matter how far away they are? But it didn't in the study. And in fact, years later, they did, I don't think he was involved in these, but they did some studies where they had mothers and their babies, and they would have the mother like 1,700 miles away from the baby. And in real time, they were monitoring the mother's nervous system and the baby's nervous system. And if they did something to change the baby's nervous system, the mother's nervous system would change in real time. And vice versa, if they did something to change the mother's nervous system, the baby in real time, their nervous system would register. So the level of interconnectedness that we all share is measurable and real. And the horses never got the memo that it's not real.
No, they did not. Neither did the dogs.
That's right. They did not get the memo. Yes. Yeah. So we can go into these really wonderful ways, whether we're working with our own bodies somatically. When I first started teaching this, I always did my absolute best to make sure that whatever group I was working with, they had their own practice as a group first before they ever went to work with the horses. That way they might have some understanding of what the horse might be experiencing. And
that would be like my ideal perfect world.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that I would spend however long working with the human before ever even putting them on a horse.
Yes, it's just the most, wonderful thing. I mean, I just think, and maybe we can create that perfect world, because in a perfect world, people would have better control of their own movement patterns, much better voluntary control. That way, like say when you're working with someone and their horse and you ask them for a movement, they'll be able to do that, because before, for many reasons, they really don't have access to it the way you might like to.
No, and I've been there myself too. And I mean, it's one of the reasons I do try to film myself ride as much as possible, because I will think that something looks one way or that my body is doing, and then I watch the video and I'm like, that is not what's happening. And as a riding instructor, I mean, that's most of my day.
Yeah.
Like, and somebody says, okay, I'm sitting up straight now. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. What a great place for you to be in, along your professional journey with horses. What a magnificent place for you to be in right now.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is very exciting. There's so much potential when you have that in your own nervous system, and then you can see it in the rider and you can help them find it, that you may, in that moment, you're helping them find it, under saddle, and in a different moment, helping them find it in a different way. And every position that we're in our brain takes that information in a different way. So it might be you're teaching the same kind of movement, but your brain is learning about it differently.
Yeah.
And it informs your body, and your body's informing your brain. And so I kept finding myself I kept finding myself arranging my world so that I was working with people who weren't asking a lot of their horses in different disciplines, or they had a mindset where they weren't causing pain in their horses and they weren't causing compensations in their horses. They at least had that level of awareness, because I just didn't want to keep going and helping people repair horses that they were just breaking those horses down. And so, and I think now we're in a place where that more people are ready to hear that message, and maybe they're tired of it and they want something different for their horses.
I hope so.
I know. I can't believe I just said that out loud, because I always tried to be so proper and not close any doors for the horses, where
Yeah.
I didn't
But
want.
I think it's an important conversation, and I'm similar to that, as you're saying, where I try to be mindful of what I say, because I don't, like a really great example is this kind of old quote that's like, oh, it takes 10 years to learn how to sit on a horse without getting in their way, and then it takes 10 years to learn how to influence a horse, and it takes 10 years to learn how to influence a horse without getting in their way. Yes. And I don't want people to hear that and feel like, well, I'm 50, it's over.
Oh, I agree.
Right? And I don't want people to think, like, when I speak of the horse as the mirror to your soul, or we talk about mirror neurons and what the horses will do when we are compensating in our own bodies, the last thing I want to do is cultivate a space where shame can leak in, because it's not, it is not beneficial.
No, it's not. No. And most people are doing what their trainers were telling them to do, and the trainer is doing what they learned to do. And so I know.
And nobody knows that it is so damaging. So there's that part of it. And I'm also like, and we need to have these conversations, because this is the world that we live in, and this is real life, and this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And your horse isn't a bicycle. And
yes, you can just start with that. We just make a little book, do a book, and the cover of it can be your horse is not a bicycle.
Not a bicycle.
It is an important conversation to have. And I know everyone, I like to think everyone has been doing the best they can, for sure.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I just knew that, like, some certain things, it's like what you're asking that horse to do over and over and over is going to break that horse down if it hasn't already. And then it turns into what you are, when we first started our conversation today about, what we used to be called behavioral issues. People think it's a behavioral issue, and it's like, no, that horse is hurting. That horse is in pain. The horse is crazy. The horse this is something that's been happening for this horse for probably a long time. And it
might just be nervous system. They might not actually even have what we could consider to be a pain response. They may just be so stuck in the sympathetic that they can't. And having been there myself, when I am in an activated state, when I am in my sympathetic nervous system, my perception of reality is skewed. It is completely skewed, and I will hear things that were not said. I will see things that were not done. I will have memories of things that never happened. Yeah. And I think that they are the same. And that so it doesn't even necessarily need to be, pain. It can be just simply that they are unable to breathe properly.
Thank you for saying that, because I think about, when I was saying that, I was thinking about two horses in particular. One was a horse the first horse I thought of was a horse who had begun, this horse was high level competition jumper, and he had started to, on the ground, become a horse who would bite people, and he'd never done that before, and it was becoming a very serious issue for his people. And I knew that he was letting them know, like, this isn't working for me. But the other horse I was thinking of was a horse who would rear up and fall over backward, and she had something going on with her pelvis.
Yeah.
And a very older horseman, a gentleman I knew that had I would always say he had more knowledge about horses in his little pinky, like this part of his pinky, than other people had in their whole body, and and other people's bodies. And he was sitting next to me, and I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it. I was like, something's going on with her pelvis. And there she goes over again. And he leans over next to me and he says, something's going on with her pelvis. It's this thing of like this. So, and thank you for saying what you said, because that needs to be said as well. You're absolutely right. If a horse has had so many experiences where they need to be sympathetic dominant in their nervous system, absolutely. The first thing that has to happen for that horse is to help them find their place.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That you're 1,000% correct. So you're right. It is not always about pain.
Not always. It's usually pain.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it's so, thank you, because it's there's, that is just needed to be said, and for people to be able to recognize what's happening with their horses and finding ways that they can help that horse have a different experience in their life, so that they get to have more ventral experiences.
Yes. And this is the incredible magic of somatic healing in my mind for horses, humans, dogs, birds, lizards, whatever.
Yeah.
Is this, the body wants to heal and the body wants to be integrated and we want to be aligned, but we do need, most of us need some help. We need mentorship. We need education. We need help. We need some eyes to be like, hey, do you see what's going on here? And to understand that, kind of like we were saying about body work, that it will do nothing if the body is not, if the emotion, if you're mentally not in a receiving energy, and then physically, if you're not working to make these slight little adjustments. I mean, it seems to be the only way forward to lasting change that I see now.
Yeah.
And I, it's not, I'm not necessarily like, I'm going to die on this hill, but where I am at right now in personal and professional life, I'm like, this is what it is. Because, as a trainer, just seeing the same horses over and over and over, and people wanting to send the horse out because it's got all these behavioral, and it's like, we can be better than that.
Yes, we absolutely can. And it is relearning for the person and for the horse, because oftentimes it's something the person's doing that's causing their own challenge in their own body. And then oftentimes it's something they're doing, unknowingly with the horse, that's also causing the challenge for the horse.
Yes.
And of course that's beyond the awareness. And so even someone who's highly trained as a somatic educator, if they have an area in their nervous system where they have sensory motor amnesia, it's a dark area of your brain anywhere for anyone. So you oftentimes will need, like you said, a mentor, a guide, someone to help you in that area who can see it for what it is and help you find the comfortable, easy way. If you're ever pushing, forcing, straining, you're off track. So we have to find that easy.
I laugh just thinking about like how many years I spent like trying to get stronger and like faster and and like how hard, and I'm not necessarily saying that high level training is a bad thing, but very similarly, the nervous system isn't regulated. Well, all you're doing is just micro tearing the crap out of your own.
That's right. At some point, yes, I mean, and it's learned, and God love us. I mean, the history of humanity, it is, here we all are, we have a lot of potential right now to be able to do amazing. I mean, we are already and have done amazing things. We all have, we're all gracefully taking this journey together, ideally. And I thought about like You know, there are different, I can think about different horsewomen that I respect and admire for different reasons, who
Yeah.
show and model different aspects of what we all need to be able to come forward and embody what we're here to do and what we're being asked to do and called to do and are already doing. And so I'm very grateful, you know, to have, you know, such a beautiful, amazing, all these amazing examples. And yeah.
Oh, so cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, we are blessed.
Yeah, we are. And, you know, and I was thinking about, you know, like, as I was saying that, I was thinking about, I kind of see in my mind's eye, like this black horse walking forward, and I can see like her front legs, you know, and I can see just her beauty and how she's so balanced, you know, and how she has this amazing way, freedom in her whole being as she's moving through life, you know, and how she doesn't have, you know, impinged pectoral muscles or, you know, any other impingements. But you know, she's got her being in her full voluntary control. And for all of us, I think each one of us, because we are all unique and we all have, you know, our individual histories and things that we're all, you know, working with and all of that. But how if we can stay true within our nature, it does make this really important coming together in a way that I don't think it can happen any other way. And that's just what I think. So,
Well, and I very much believe in connectedness and synchronicity,
yeah.
and it's something my husband and I talk a lot about is what a difficult time it is to be an equine industry professional, and what an incredibly exciting time. Like, if you had told me when I was like 14
Yeah.
what I would be doing at 40, it would be like amazing, right?
Yes.
If you told me at 25, I would have been like, "Well, what a bunch of woo-woo crap." I mean, I'm real
What would your
serious.
14-year-old say though? I'm curious. Like your 14-year-old self, like she's live in the room right now. How would she, like, do not hold back? How would she be?
Oh my gosh, she'd just be so excited about like,
Yeah.
just like you can get ponies to like lie down in the dirt and cuddle you. Like, wow, like this is so good. And then you could just get on them with like nothing, and you could just do that, and they're happy. Like, yeah, you're like, and I
It's
think that,
awesome.
I mean, that's coming back to the joy, and
Yeah.
finding joyful movement, and how much the horses love that, and how much kids love that.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
like, you put a kid on a pony,
Mhm.
and everybody is having a wonderful time,
Mhm.
and there's nothing bad going on for the pony. Like, there it is, this unbridled joy, and
Yes.
literally,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And then as we become more educated and caught up, and especially if we're classically trained and competitive, we get, the more we know, the tighter we get, the more we get
Absolutely.
locked into, well, this step wasn't in perfect balance, so I need to micromanage, and
Right.
and we lose that ability to just allow our bodies to be carried,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I think kids are so good at. So I'm thinking about like my 14-year-old self, who could just hop on anything, and
Right.
like,
Mhm.
and honestly, I probably did far less damage to horses as a rider at that point than I did in my 20s, where I was trying to perform all the
Where you were
time.
learning, right?
Yeah.
I agree 1,000%. And my thoughts were headed along that line when you mentioned earlier about you didn't want, there was something you said about you didn't want people to feel, you know, blocked, like it would take 10 years and that kind of thing. And I was thinking about that. And as you were saying that, about how I think the most freedom anyone's ever had, you know, when you're a kid and you just jump on a ride, the horse is the happiest and you're the happiest. Everybody's the happiest. And so, and the least damage is done because your horse is just moving how they move and you're moving how you move. And it's all good. As long as you had someone who taught you, don't try to hold on with your hands,
Yeah.
use your body, learn how to be on your, do not be yanking the horse's mouth, right? Ever,
Yeah.
no matter what. Like, you can kill yourself, but don't yank the horse's
But
mouth.
don't do that.
Yeah, that's pretty much my mom's theory. That's how I learned to ride. You can do
I
whatever,
love it.
kill yourself, but don't hurt the horse's mouth. So, it was all about the horse. So very, thank you, Mom. And that was important.
Yeah.
So, I do think there's something to, like, people just finding it for themselves in the ways they can and not trying to get it perfect, because definitely when we're trying to get it perfect, your muscle spindle fibers will be in what's called an excitatory response, and means you'll be tense, and then nothing good ever happens when you're
No.
so nothing good ever happens. So
No.
it's like, it's yeah, I think and I knew that, like, that there's something about, the people who, if they're going in, they want to do competitive things with their horses, that is a place where they're going to need to do a lot of work on themselves and a lot of development on themselves, so that they do have the kind of nervous system and body that
Yes.
not, and honestly, so many people ask me to do so many things that would have been like a lot of visibility, but
Yeah.
I knew, I was like, I don't want to work with people who ask more of their horses than they ask of their own bodies. And
Mhm.
that was a value for me. That,
Well, that's beautiful.
yeah.
I
And
think that's beautiful.
thank you. Yeah. So here we are, right? It's like,
Here we are, not riding bicycles.
Yes. I'm telling you, that should be a book. I love
That
it.
should be a book. If your horse is not a bicycle, and neither are you.
Like,
And but
yeah.
I do think that gets me thinking about one of the things as an educator that I struggle with, and personally as well, is how to take, honestly, the seriousness of learning intentional movement and of learning how to stand, how to walk, how to breathe, which we think we learn and then we do our whole lives, but we do not. That somewhere along the line we lose our ability to breathe and stand and walk and pick things
Yes.
up and reach for things, and we become pretty out of alignment. And so we need to take it very, very seriously. And I feel the same way about the horsemanship, that the way that we handle the horses, the way we move, the feel that we offer them, it is very serious, and we should take it seriously. And it should also be joyful. So
Yes.
that's what I run into, that I don't want people skipping over how important it is to lie down on the mat and learn how to move your toes properly, to get to this woohoo yeehaw, now we're having such a great time. Because I'm like, you can't really have one without the other.
Right. The level, the potential there, Moshe Feldenkrais, he didn't work with animals, but he influenced the lineage of this work, and also of Linda Tellington Jones' work.
Yes.
Interesting enough. And but Moshe had a quote that I love. He said, "Know what you're doing, and then you can do what you want." And and the thing about we'll just let that sit for a minute.
Mhm.
And then to something you were saying earlier, that those words, body awareness, I think there's a reason, there's something in you, a knowing in you that knows, like, that's not telling the whole story, because it isn't. So, because here's why: our neuronal connections for, like, our practices and the level of how we're practicing and the way we're practicing and where our awareness is being guided to go toward to help reintegrate again somatically. And by the way, 99.9% of people who are being taught to teach yoga are being taught to take your brain's awareness to the opposite side. And that is a challenge. That is a challenge for people. So for those of you listening, put your awareness on the side you're bending toward. Always.
Even for me, I'm like,
what your teacher's saying, like, put your, like, it's a thing. So you'll have a much happier body, and you'll be less likely to injure, and so forth and so on. Thank you, Eleanor Criswell Hannah, for that. And for lots of things. She's part of my posse. It's like, we're a posse. So if you think about those words, body awareness, The reason that it feels limited for you is because you have a knowing about something because of your experiences. And I'll tell you where I'm headed with this in the neuroscience world. Every time you do a practice with awareness where you're not forcing and straining and you're feeling and you're working with certain principles, you're going to be creating more neuronal connections, which means you're going to be getting better at what you're doing in the saddle, for example, or with your horse on the ground. Just how you halter the horse will be different and better, and your horse will notice these things. You'll know, you'll feel it, they'll feel it. But the reason for that, so Moshe, when he said that about know what you're doing and then you can do what you want, and we talk about something called the potential of the human, right, of us, but now we're talking about your horse's potential. We're beyond, so far beyond. So your horse's potential. But once you are practicing this way and you're developing these neuronal connections, there's no limit to how much better, best, and bestest you can become. And I'm saying it that way for a reason, right? There is no limit to the bestedness of the bestedness because there's no limit to the neuronal connections you'll make.
That's so cool.
It is super cool. So that to those words, body awareness, that shows you like, it's really about your integration. We may have a better, the word somatic, people, if they did an interview one time, an editor changed the title of the article to somatic. And the reporter, the girl that did the interview, she said, it's somatic. And he changed it to semantic. So, but the word somatic is.
Sorry.
Like, I think you get where I'm headed with this, right? So, and I have just damn near killed myself to make that word known, by the way. Getting on planes, getting on, it was a lot. Rental cars in weird places in Kauai. I mean, that's been some stuff. But let's just have a moment for that. So, but the integration. So right now, the word we can use is I was going to say somatic integration, but I know there's something beyond that we can speak to that wants to be heard. Right now, we'd have level 1 body awareness, level 2 somatic integration, and there's another one out there.
And there's another one, and this makes me think about one of our mentors. He said that one of the most beautiful things about horsemanship and riding, when it is truly your art, is how light can a horse be, how soft can a horse be, how centaurian can horse and human be. Nobody is ever going to know.
He's 1,000%.
No one will ever know. And I think some people can recoil from that and feel like, well, geez, then what's the purpose? For me, I'm like that with my kind of childlike wonder with the universe. Like, I'm just like, yeah.
Well,
to me, it takes the pressure off. There isn't some end thing that we're trying to accomplish, some sort of tangible goal that we're investing in, that, if we get there, we'll be happy or whatever. Just no pressure. No pressure at all.
In the Yoga Sutras, it says, don't do it for the fruit, do it for the action, right? So it's like whatever you're chasing will elude you. You have, and so that is, if someone was goal oriented, they'd say, well, then what's the point? But if someone's doing it for the doing of it, like the experience of the doing of it, which is where kids are, by the way. That's why people love kids so much, because they're in the moment doing it for the experience of it. They haven't been taught to be goal oriented yet. They're just in the exploratory phase of whatever it is that they're experiencing. That's ventral, by the way. And that's where the potential is in that. But if someone's goal oriented, they very much would not like what this potential is about, the centaur. But it says that it's like, don't do it for the fruit of it, do it for the action itself. And it's like, I'll say it again, like the goal oriented part, the goal will elude you. And it goes, I would suppose it goes back to the muscle spindle fibers, right? Being so tight and you're not having fun. And
Yeah.
but it does make me think. I am kind of a geek. Sometimes I do love studies, and I love, like, I'm kind of a geek. But they did a study with a group of kids and a group of highly trained they were the group of the adults, they were engineers and scientists and architects and I forget what else, but like very highly skilled builders,
Yeah.
architects and engineers, and then a group of 5-year-olds. And they gave them the same materials and the same assignment, and they timed them, and they did it over and over. And every time it was the same result, but they gave them uncooked spaghetti noodles and marshmallows. And their assignment was build the tallest structure they could build using the marshmallows and the uncooked spaghetti noodles. Every time the 5-year-olds would beat the engineers and the architects, like way beyond. Yeah.
Because they have no preconceived ideas about what is possible and what, like, they don't care. They're just
That's
like,
right.
well, yeah, well, let's
That's
just.
right. And they were willing to just be like, get in there. And they didn't have this idea about like who knew more and who was the senior and who was the, they were just like getting in there, making it happen. So that's what they figured out. They were like, oh, that's why they hadn't had that conditioning yet. They were just like, let's do this, So I think there's something to be learned from that, just to get in there and just do it, so.
Yeah. And think that it's fun. And I mean, even thinking about, my own integration with, breath work and meditation and yoga practices and movement practices, that it used to be something that I did so that I would feel strong, so that I would be a better rider. It had all of these, like, well, I need to spend 20 minutes on my mat every day or my back will hurt. I need to, right? Like, and so I had all these, I mean, honestly, like, tensions about it.
Yeah.
And as that has drifted away, and like, I couldn't tell you how long I spend on my mat. I no longer set a timer. I don't know. I do what feels good, and I do it just because I like it. There isn't,
for the fruit of it. Yeah. And
yeah,
not,
that it's not because, well, if I don't do this, then, or if I do this, then it's just like, this feels nice.
Yes. Yeah. I thought about that too, about some of the things I got involved in yoga because I'd had a pelvis injury and a low back injury. And it very much helped me to come back into fullness again, out of pain and into abilities to do what I started doing. And then I would say then somatic education is such a precise way of working that oftentimes it can be such a profound thing for people who have debilitating back pain. And then the reason I'm thinking about this is oftentimes people who are involved in yoga, they miss a lot of life because they think, well, I have to be doing my 2-hour practice every morning. I can't like go to the beach with my son because I have to do this practice. So they're kind of like locked into the practice itself, and they're not getting to just spontaneously enjoy, be in the flow of what's possible in their world that might bring them so much more joy. And so it's like if you just kept heating up a skillet, well, the skillet is hot. It's fine. Like you don't have to keep heating up the skillet. Now if you notice like it got cold and you need that back again, heat it up again then. But it's a way like, we're not here to serve those practices. Those practices are here to serve us. And
This is so brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you for having the conversation, because it's, I mean, I always felt like sometimes it's like, I mean, this might sound dramatic, but how in Moses, he's like, set my people free, like, I always felt a little bit like, set my people free, like, the horses, the people, let my people go, set them free, like, let them be free.
I like a little bit of drama myself.
Yeah. I don't know if I got that from the Moses movie. I don't know, the 10 Commandments when I was a kid. I don't know. But it's always felt a little like, let my people go, let them go because, yeah, I mean, there's a time when we need the discipline of something, and then there's a time to be free, So
Yeah.
I think I guess that's maybe a little bit going back to what Moshe said about know what you're doing and then you do what you want, It's
Yes.
like if you need to do that practice every day to be out of back pain, then that's your information. But if you're good, yeah, maybe you can go do something else for a while and come back if you need to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or if you need to practice every day so you're not yelling at your kids.
Yeah.
But then if all of a sudden you're a new person and you're not yelling at your kids, like you might use that time for something else, unless you start to yell at your kids again and then go
Go
do
do
the
your
thing. I mean, this is just my take on it for now. I might have a different thought on that. I mean, might have a different way of seeing that when I'm the next iteration of it's what I know for now.
Such a beautiful thing too, to be able to say, okay, well, this is the truth I speak now, and
Yeah.
that might change.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I might figure out, oh, well, actually, maybe
Yeah,
not
I learned
for
this,
everyone.
and
Yeah.
now I think something different.
Yeah. And this thing around like certain things, they're not for everyone. Like yoga wasn't not for everyone, or like there's a body work called Human Design that I just have a blast with. I love it. Like I'm completely obsessed with it. And that's not for everyone either. But I do think that for some people it's, so some people, they may absolutely have some sort of like karmic agreement that Eleanor told me early on, she said, I think you made some agreements with the horses very early on in your life, and I was like,
What?
I didn't even, yeah, it was like 20 years ago. Yeah, about 20, coming up on 20 years ago. But I see now. Yeah, I see. Yeah, so do my part. So you and I'll have the conversations because evidently that's part of the agreement. So part of the agenda to
And it's been good for me because I have felt called as well, that, and for a long time I've just been kind of like hiding in the corner doing my own like freaky weird stuff that nobody knows about because I'm a fear and I'm afraid of what people will think and what.
Absolutely.
And so I sort of isolated myself for several years now. It's been about 3 years where I'm just kind of like, okay, well, I'm not doing what everybody else is doing. And from what I have experienced, other people are not all that interested in what I'm doing. So I'm just going to hide away in the corner and do my thing. And just especially over the last kind of 6 months or so, I felt really called to like, okay, like climb out of the hole. There's something here to share, and like, don't be so afraid to share it, because if 20 people hear it and one person gets a benefit, well, then it's worth it. And if 19 people go, well, you're an idiot, well, whatever.
Well, when one person gets it, it's like one horse gets it. And absolutely, there's a lot of, there's a science called epigenetics about, the history of like what our ancestors have experienced. And it wasn't always safe for people to show up, and it wasn't always safe for people to say, lots of things. But I find that, hanging around people who are brave will make you braver. And if you don't know anybody's brave, then that means it's your job to be brave. Like I'm saying that to myself, it's my job to be brave. I don't know anyone who's brave, and I do know people who are brave, but I do think that helps, it's like that. And you and I, sometime if you want, we can talk a little bit about some things about human design, because I think that's got some parts to it that play into this, kind of what we're touching on. But what would you say to someone who's watching this who, like, say maybe they think maybe they need this work, but they're a little bit like scared to do it, or what would you say to them?
I would say listen, like, what does your brain say? What is the mind space saying? And it's going to have all these stories and all these narratives and all these things that it's going to, and then listen to it, validate it, and then give it a job to do. So it's busy.
Keep it busy.
What does your heart say? What does your body say? And in a lot of cases, I think our hearts, I know for myself, might be saying, I need this. And our body is saying, I can't yet. I'm
Yeah.
not ready. Listen.
Yeah.
Listen, or your body is saying, I need this, I need this, I need this. And your heart is saying, I need this, I need this, I need this. And your brain's going, well, it's stupid. Blah, blah, blah. Well,
Yeah.
and I think that would be my biggest thing, is to actually, okay, well, can we get our parts connected, sitting at the table, having a conversation, and then actually listen to it. And then if you're feeling called to it, but you're so unsure that it makes you recoil, then don't do it yet. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a just do it person anymore, because I'm
Yeah.
like, because then you won't get the benefits. You
Absolutely.
won't if you're not really prepared and really, and it's also like, there's nothing, for me at least, there's nothing scary about it.
Yeah.
But that's how I feel now. 10 years ago, I might have felt very different. I don't know, because I'm not me 10 years ago anymore.
It's such a beautiful answer.
Oh, shoot.
It is. I mean, and it's so true. It's like bringing all the parts of you to the table. And if you don't feel ready yet, I would say it's not time yet. Yeah, it's such a beautiful answer. Um, I remember there were things I wanted to do, things I wanted to reach out and do, but I felt there's part of me, I was being pulled clearly. And literally horses were showing up to people in yoga rooms to get me to get my ass in gear. Like
Yes,
it was that,
I've
it was
experienced
that,
Yeah.
just being honest, sorry for the language people who, yeah. But it was that thing. But it was, I was also, it's like there was the fear, you know, it was like there was a little bit of that there. And so it's like, reach out, dip your toe in the water, find out, you know, maybe share what the fear is, get information, go back, process that, you know. That, you know, for some of us, that's one way that it kind of moves the needle forward, but we're not damaged by it.
Yeah.
And like you're saying is, yeah, I mean, I think that I think you and I, like, I know in the interest of time, we probably won't talk about that today, but for those of you who are listening and watching, if you like the conversation, you want more of it, let us know, because there's so much to be shared around how we've been conditioned and what we've been taught and all of those things. So, and I do love sharing in this format. It is something I really enjoy. And, but there was a woman, she's been a student and a client for about 15 years. And she told me, she said, I was terrified to work with you. She said, I wanted to. And she's like, I would say, and I wanted to, she said, but I was just so scared. And I'm like, why? Like, I couldn't imagine why. And I really don't know, but I know that for sometimes that's a thing for people. And it has been certainly for me as well, like with certain things. So, but I love the answer that you gave. It's really beautiful. And I love it. Bringing all of our little parts to the table. And
This whole experience has been so beautiful. I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, me too. And is there anything you want to add? Like if you
No, I'll think of it at 3 a.m.
just
I
yeah.
just add it in the comments. Like, oh, by the way, here are 25 other things that are somewhat vaguely related.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that because we're very, you know, there's something about how being able to connect things. A friend of mine who teaches martial arts, and he said, if you know one thing, know 1,000 things. It's like, you know, it's very beautiful to think about how all the approaches. There's a different saying that's more commonly known: how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And so any way that you can start, for me personally, that I know, it's like if there's even through a conversation, helping someone soften their own bodies so that they can be softer with their horse in a way that's beneficial for the horse. Now, there are times I know where you need to be quick, and there are times when you need to be clear. And I'm not confused about those. I get that. Like, I understand that. And for the benefit of the horse, I hope lots of people get that
Understand that.
and
Yeah.
understand that. So
that gentle, like, soft does not necessarily mean slow,
mhm.
and firm doesn't necessarily mean hard.
Right, exactly.
I can be very, very firm and still be soft in the field.
Exactly. Yes.
And I can be very hard and completely ineffective. Like it.
Right. It's, yeah, I think that is like talking about things that are kind of, might seem ethereal to people. I'm not sure, but I know that there's a way to convey that for people through the nervous system. The only way they can bring it into practice with their horses, is you plant the seed, you can hear the idea. Maybe it gets translated that way. Maybe it has to happen through some floor work. Maybe it has to happen through an experience with their horse.
Yeah.
There's a way that those things can happen, but I think first they have to be aware of the fact that they can happen,
Yeah.
and that it's
be very gentle and still be
yeah.
sharp as a whip. You need to
Yeah,
be.
and that, I think that's one thing that's kind of a mystery for some people about people that are quite masterful with horses, that are very, very adept. There is something that's happening there that a lot of people, they aspire to it. I see it when it's happening. It's hard to put a name to it. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it as well.
Yes. I know what you mean. I'm not quite there yet myself. I step into it. Every
Yeah.
once in a while, it's like the veil gets pulled back and I come into that place and it happens. But
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that is a work in progress.
Definitely. Yeah. And the same thing, same thing can definitely happen in yoga as well. You can be with a teacher who they understand some certain things, and all of a sudden you're balanced on one arm upside down, and you've never done that in your life, and you don't know how you got there. And there you are, happy as a clam, upside down, balanced on one arm. And then you go home, and then you're like, you may retain it, you may not, but it's like, it's kind of similar. That's interesting. But there's something happening, and I think those things can also help be developed in a person, but it doesn't happen through forcing and straining, and like you said, not having all of the parts of you present too. So I love people who just want good things for their horses, and they're willing to just be at that place with their horse, wherever that place is.
Well, but that's the place where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think that there's a like, okay, well, I want to be with my horse and I want to be with me and I want us to be together in softness. What and it's like, well, then you're already there.
Yeah.
Like, right? I'm like, well, then you're already there. Like, don't judge yourself. Like, try not to compare, try not to, it's like, well, if that's really what's in your heart, then that's reality.
Yes.
And that's reality for your horse.
The other things are just a learning curve. Like, that's where I think that's the gap there, especially maybe even more so for women. I'm not sure for men, because I haven't really had that conversation with men, because a lot of times women, there's a certain thing for women about they do aspire to be more and better with their horses and all that, and they also know there is also the consideration for what's best for the horse and that kind of thing. So I think that can happen through, I may ask some men about that. It may take them a while to find their answer. I may be waiting a few months for that, but we'll see. We'll see.
Ask anyway.
I'm definitely going to. Yeah. And then this question I was thinking is like, what would you say to someone who's tried all sorts of things, either for their own body or for their horses? What's one thing you would say to them that you feel would be useful?
Education is the kindling of a flame and not the filling of a vessel.
Will you say that again? I love
That
it.
education is the kindling of a flame and not the filling of a vessel. And I think Socrates, might have been Plato.
I will say Socrates or Plato.
Yeah,
Maybe both. Yeah, you don't know.
I should know that off the top of my head, but whatever. Because, and I think that we are all, and I mean, here we are tying right back into, somatic education, that I think we want so badly for someone else to tell us. Mm. Whether we don't trust ourselves and we need the validation, or whatever it is, I think that we are sort of programmed to really look externally. Yeah. And to, well, okay, I'll try this, I'll try this, I'll try this, I'll try this, I'll try this. And it's almost a deflective avoidant. It's like, really what you need to do is look inside. and feel through it. And yes, actually feel, not rationalize, not right. Like, no, actually feel.
Right. Being able to feel. Yeah. And that is, I mean, it is directly related with somatic education. If you've been wearing a scratchy shirt, and a lot of people have, that interrupts your ability to feel. Your brain will literally stop receiving that information, which means you're no longer feeling. And that's just the nicest example of why one may no longer feel or listen to their bodies anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, well, this is I was teaching a group of people. They were not horse people, but I was asking about something about we were going to be doing a certain practice, and I said, well, if you've been like horses, they're led around with a halter, right? So it's kind of like led around by the head, so to speak. And I said, that's done to humans as well. We just call it corporate. Oh yeah. I still have private clients to this day because of that workshop. They were like, I'm your man. I'm in. Let's do it. Let's go. Like some of my favorite clients came out of that. Yeah. And I think it was that moment of that, yeah.
Yeah. That's a bit of a, oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's like even that, I mean, someone thinking about how they're working with their horse when they're in a halter, just, and I know you do. I know maybe some people
I try to.
been modeled for them, or
Yeah.
and I know every moment is not a perfect moment, but it's just maybe it's painting a picture for people about how we can start to work with ourselves and work with others. And but there's a very precise way, working with your horses somatically that's just beyond the halter and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Those are just things to like start to think about, so that once your horse is so integrated somatically, and there is a word beyond that. I know there's something beyond it. But once they're integrated somatically, then you're not putting habituations back through how you're riding your horse or leading your horse or that kind of stuff. So shoeing, barefoot freedom, yeah. Well, I'm thrilled that we had this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. This means an incredible amount to me.
Oh, well, thank you for
No, you're just over your change in my life. Like,
well, let's keep doing it. So
yes. So like I said, when this is kind of better, what's happening over here.
Yes.
That I'd love to connect with you again and get on your schedule and
Me too. Absolutely. Yeah. Please.
have more wonderful conversations, because this is great.
Fun. So much fun. Yeah. Thank you so much again for doing
You.
Yeah. Thank you. And please give Celeste a hug and for me.
I will.
Hello and a thank you. And again, thank you for coming, Chiara. And this is Chiara Poscente. I need to do that my southern accent. Chiara Poscente. I'm Gloria Hester. Thank you for watching and for sharing this with us, sharing this love with us, and share it with your horse.
Who is not a bicycle.
Yes, it was not a bicycle. Okay, thank you so much, Chiara.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Bye-bye.